the butt, right? Where did that style really come from? That style came from slavery times you when that was a sign where a homosexual slave master, whether if it's white or Ashkenazi or Caucasian, right, or European white, what they would do is after they rape the men in the butt, right, the men was ordered to wear their pants beneath their butt cheeks, right? It's just like in prison too. This is also something that's practiced in prison, where you would see a man would actually have his pants low, right? That's just basically he's selling his butthole. But that style came from a PTSD from the time where the nasty white men, nasty homosexual, nasty European men used to love going in the behinds of black men. So, for example, this buck breaking was mainly utilized by slave owners too in the Caribbean and also in the United States, right? So, for example, let's talk about the United States for now, America. So, what would happen is let's say you'll have slaves, right, that was imported from the Caribbean, from the continent of Africa, right? They would actually, you know, treat these slaves differently. So, for example, from Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, North Carolina, South Carolina, places of Kentucky, right? You would have these nasty, nasty Caucasian men, these nasty white men. What they would do is, let's say if a slave would be acting up around that time, right? Yeah, let's say a slave would act up around that time. So what would happen is they would take that slave. Sometimes they would anally rape the slave men in front of their family or in front of the other slaves. So, they would rape them real bad, where feces, blood, semen is everywhere, right? Just the way they like it, peanut butter and jelly it up, right? That's how they like it. These nasty, nasty MFers, you know. So what would happen is sometimes if they want to, spend a time with them, right? And when I say if they would want to spend time with them, they would actually be able to take those slaves, those African American or black men, they would take them to the Caribbeans, right? The French, the English, the Dutch, the Irish, the Spanish, the Portuguese, that was their thing in going inside of black men's buttholes, or have them perform fellatio on them in front of these other slaves, right? So that was like a way of checking them. And these individuals are still around, right? So if you ever heard of the Buccaneers, right? It's like an NFL team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, Buccaneers, the meaning of the truth of Buccaneers, right? We sometimes say, oh, that's like a gang or a ruthless pirate. But the real term of buccaneer was men that buck men, which is basically men that rape men. So these pirates, would rape men in their buttholes, just like how they like it. So during slavery, there was something that was very rarely talked about, right? And it's called buck breaking, giving you some information. This is where they would look out on their plantations. And I'm talking about the nasty, nasty, hideous white men, nasty, hideous Caucasian, Khazars, Europeans, right? So sometimes they would look on the plantations that they would have, and they'll take the biggest, the worst, or the strongest men, right? And what they would do is they would take this brother, they would take this man, and they would tie him down, right? They would tie him down. Sometimes they would, tie him down to a tree, or they would, tie them down in a way, and they would spread eagle naked. And spread eagle naked is basically like almost like you're doing a split, right? If you could do a split, right? So that's how they would have the men, right? And they would have them tilt over, where, right? So their rear end would be up. So what they would do is they would make sure that that man, that strong man, because that's what they love. They love, effing big black men and whatever. Long as it's something that they can do, right? Because it makes them feel like men. Some of these individuals, they got mushroom-sized penises, right? They micro penises. And they're still here, right? So what they would do is when they're not raping children, just like they used to rape slave children too. Now, don't get it twisted. Sometimes they would, if they could not doing that, they would fall into the man, and they would always like to show their dominance, right? Because remember, these are nasty European men that like to play in doodoo, like to play in blood and semen, right? Till today, you can see them. So what they would do, they would gather around women, children, and other slaves, right? Other slave men, right? Like big, whether they're big, tall, whatever, right? And what they would do is while that man or the slave is, spread eagle naked, they would, spread the butt cheeks, and then they would just ram home, right? Ram home as hard as they can in the anus, whether if that man is bleeding, whether if poop is coming out. Like these some nasty individuals, right? And they would only do that to feminize the man in front of them. So the other slaves and the women could see that they have no protection, right? So it was just like a movie, right? Pulp Fiction, right? Pulp Fiction. If you've seen the movie Pulp Fiction, Bruce Willis, Samuel Jackson, John Travolta. Yeah, in this particular movie, where there's a scene where Vin Rhames, right? He's played by Marcellus Wallace, and he was fighting with he was fighting with Bruce Willis, right, in the store, where the store owner pulled a gun out on them, and the store owner told him that, hey, there's an officer that's gonna come down and play around with them. So eventually they went down in the basement. If you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you haven't, you can check the movie Pulp Fiction, which is a real live stuff. So what happened is they were playing the cop, right? Which, as you know, these police officers are, or their backgrounds are, from their family, or they're like the slave runners, right? So in case if a slave would run away, they would call the police officers to chase them down. So this thing is still in their blood. So what they did in that movie is, these two individuals, these two white nasty men again, they played Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, and then they took Marcellus Wallace, and they just started raping him. They were taking turns raping him in the butthole. You'll see that in the scene as well. So when they do that, this would weaken the slave. It would weaken the man, right? So that he wouldn't be able to resist, right? And also, the rape would follow. These white slave owners, whether if it's their Ashkenazi Khazars, whether if it's some